I didn't want to wake up today. Not because I was physically exhausted, not because I didn't sleep enough, but because I knew exactly what was waiting for me on the other side of that alarm. The cold air, the cold floor, the kind of silence that feels heavy instead of peaceful. And the books, sitting there, unchanged, unfinished, quietly reminding me that nothing got easier overnight. It's day 2, and somehow it already feels heavier than day 1. That's the strange part no one really warns you about, how quickly the weight builds. My alarm rang. I heard it clearly. I was awake, but I didn't move. I just stayed there, staring at the ceiling, letting the sound fade into the background like it didn't matter. And in that stillness, the negotiation started. It always does. Just 5 more minutes, you worked hard yesterday, starting a little late won't ruin anything. The excuses weren't loud or dramatic. They were calm, reasonable, almost convincing. That's what makes them dangerous. But underneath all of it, there was a quieter voice telling the truth. It is that deep. This matters more than you're pretending it does. Because board exams don't care how you feel. They don't adjust for your mood. They don't give extra marks because you were tired or unmotivated or mentally drained. And the uncomfortable truth is, your future doesn't care either. It will simply reflect what you chose to do today. So I stayed there for a moment longer, not fighting the exam, not thinking about results, but fighting something much closer, my own resistance to begin. There's a word that explains this moment better than anything else: Sankalpa. It's often translated as determination, but that translation feels incomplete, because when people hear determination, they imagine intensity, energy, a kind of loud confidence that pushes you forward. Sankalpa isn't like that. It's quiet, almost invisible. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up when everything else leaves. When motivation disappears, when excitement fades, when discipline feels too heavy to carry, Sankalpa is what remains. It's the decision you make in silence, without emotion, without drama. The truth is, anyone can work hard when they feel like it. Anyone can sit down and study on a day when they're motivated, when the energy is high, when everything feels aligned. But that version of effort doesn't define you. That's the baseline. What defines you is what you do on days like this, when your body says no, when your mind resists, when every part of you is pulling in the opposite direction and you still choose to move forward. Not because you feel ready, not because you feel confident, but because you said you would. That's Sankalpa. It's not about perfection, it's not about intensity, it's about consistency in the absence of desire. It's about choosing the harder path when no one is watching, when there's no immediate reward, when the only thing guiding you is a quiet promise you made to yourself. And this is where the real separation happens, not on exam day, not when results come out. Those are just outcomes. The real shift happens here, in these small, private moments, in the dark, in the cold, at the edge of quitting. This is where your trajectory changes, not all at once, but slowly, decision by decision, action by action. There's something else that most people misunderstand about success, something that doesn't get talked about enough because it doesn't sound appealing. Excellence is boring. Not occasionally boring, not sometimes repetitive, consistently, deeply, almost painfully boring. It doesn't feel like progress most of the time. It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like doing the same thing over and over again without any visible change. The same chair, the same desk, the same subjects, the same type of questions, again and again and again. In the beginning, it feels unbearable. Your brain starts searching for escape. It wants stimulation, something new, something different. It wants to check your phone, switch tasks, do anything except stay where you are, because staying feels uncomfortable. But what most people don't realize is that mastery is hidden inside that repetition. Not in moments of intensity, not in bursts of motivation, but in the willingness to continue when nothing feels exciting anymore. You don't become great by chasing high-energy moments. You become great by enduring low-energy ones, by sitting there when it's dull, by continuing when it feels slow, by staying when your mind is trying to leave. And if you stay long enough, something begins to shift. It's subtle at first. The resistance doesn't disappear completely, but it softens. The noise in your head gets quieter, the urge to escape weakens, and gradually, without you even noticing, you enter a different state. You're no longer forcing yourself to study, you're just studying. You're reading, understanding, solving, without constantly questioning whether you should continue. Time starts to blur. Minutes turn into hours without the usual friction. This is flow. And despite how it's often portrayed, flow isn't something you access instantly. It's not something you trigger with the right playlist or the perfect setup. It's something you earn by staying longer than most people are willing to stay. Most people never reach this state, not because they lack intelligence or ability, but because they leave too early. They interpret boredom as a signal to stop, when in reality, it's a threshold to cross. The discomfort you feel in those early minutes isn't a warning, it's an entry point, and on the other side of it is where real work happens. That's where depth is built, quietly, slowly, without recognition. And the strange thing about depth is that you don't notice it while it's forming. There's no clear moment where everything clicks. It accumulates in the background, until one day, without warning, something that felt impossible suddenly feels manageable. Something that confused you yesterday makes sense today. Not because of a single breakthrough, but because of all the time you spent when it didn't feel like it was working. That's the reward. Not excitement, not validation, just progress. Quiet, undeniable progress. If you're in that place right now, where starting feels harder than continuing, you don't need a complete system or a perfect plan. You need something simpler, something small enough that your mind can't reject it. One approach that works consistently is the 5-minute rule. Instead of telling yourself you need to study for hours, you reduce the task to something almost insignificant, just 5 minutes. That's all. No pressure to continue, no expectation to perform. Just sit down and begin. Because the real challenge isn't the duration of the work, it's the initiation. Once you start, something changes. The friction that felt overwhelming before begins to fade. Your brain shifts from resistance to engagement, and more often than not, those 5 minutes extend naturally. You don't have to force it. Momentum takes over. The second thing to understand is that willpower is unreliable. It fluctuates. It depends on your mood, your energy, your environment. If you rely on it completely, you'll be inconsistent by default. Instead, you design your environment to reduce the need for willpower. You make distractions harder to access and focus easier to maintain. Put your phone in another room. Clear your desk so there's nothing competing for your attention. Create a space that signals to your brain that it's time to work. These changes might seem small, but they compound, because discipline isn't about constantly forcing yourself to do the right thing. It's about structuring your surroundings so that the right thing becomes the natural choice. When your environment supports your goals, you don't have to fight yourself as often, and that reduces the mental load, making consistency more sustainable. Right now, whether you realize it or not, there's a version of you in the future observing this exact moment, not in a dramatic way, not judging or criticizing, but simply watching. That version of you is shaped by what you choose to do today. They're sitting somewhere, holding the results of all these small decisions, and they're looking back at you, not at your best day, not at your worst day, but at this ordinary, difficult, quiet moment where you had a choice. And what they want isn't perfection. They don't need you to have a flawless routine or an extraordinary burst of productivity. They just need you not to quit. Because this journey isn't built on perfect days. It's built on days like this, days where nothing feels aligned, where everything feels heavy, and you still show up. Day 2 isn't supposed to feel easy. It's supposed to challenge you. It's supposed to expose the gap between what you want and what you're willing to do for it. And the fact that you're still here, still considering continuing, still listening, that matters. That counts for something. So the next step isn't complicated. You don't need to think about the entire syllabus or the final result. You just need to get up, sit down, open the book, begin. Not because you feel ready, not because you feel motivated, but because you made a decision earlier and you're choosing to honor it now. That's how identity is built, not through intentions, but through actions repeated under pressure. And slowly, without you noticing, you become someone who follows through, someone who continues, someone who doesn't rely on feeling good to do what needs to be done. And that version of you is already forming, right here, in this moment. So take the step, begin. And when tomorrow comes, we show up again.